Okay, great people, great salespeople, great engineers, great architects, great executives, great people are, they know that closing deals isn't about having that perfect script or just delivering the best pitch. It's about understanding how people make decisions. Every conversation, whether you're in insurance, selling insurance like life, home, real estate, 100,000 $1 million homes, or any other product or service, comes down to three psychological principles that I think influence whether someone chooses to move forward. Before I go through this framework, I call it the LPP framework. I'm going to talk about the psychology behind every sales conversation when talking about this framework. During my framework, I wanted to create some memorable acronym, and this class isn't about teaching, but also my leading up my thought process and leading up towards this. I came up with a few options, and I had LPP, simple, likability, perception, and positioning, which is one. And then I came up with the memory phrases for those and different catchphrases. I also had the three P's. I had the TPP. I had trust, perception. I was coming through like a block of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And I had VIP, value, positioning, influence, personal connection. That it changes the original wording on that. I wanted to make it a little more market friendly if I did decide to go that route. So I decided different pronounceable mnemonics like laps, for example. And there I would explain the autonomy and what that shapes, how that shapes the prospect's perception. And I'd be explaining that creating the autonomy is what shapes the prospect's perception, right? And finally, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna stick with this. Um, Lead with LPP. I thought was my best choice. Um, L stands for likability, P stands for perception, and the second P sounds for positioning, right? Or L2P, right? Or L2Ps, right? So I stuck with that. And, likability creates trust. Perception creates comfort, and positioning creates value. Pretty straightforward, right? So when I started with the likability, I thought about the people buying from people like they like and trust. And here's the mnemonic for that. Just gonna make this a little bit easier for you guys to kind of see that. And that's the memory phrase that I want you guys to learn on that. And again, there's different concepts and different ways of talking about that. You know, Great salespeople know that closing deals isn't about having that perfect script or delivering the best pitch. It's kind of about understanding how people make decisions. Every conversation, whether you're selling insurance, car insurance, home insurance, life insurance, you're selling multi-million dollar homes, you're selling products or services or any other product, it comes down to three psychological principles that will influence whether someone chooses to move forward. And when you consistently apply these three principles, LPP or L2P, your conversations become more natural. Your objections become easier to handle. And prospects begin to see you as a trusted advisor rather than just another salesperson. The LPP framework or the L2P framework isn't about manipulating people. It's about communicating in a way that builds trust, reduces pressure, and helps prospects or clients, your potential clients, make confident decisions. We look at likability, right? And when we talk about likability, we talk about people who buy from people who like and trust, who they like and trust. It doesn't matter what you're selling. If someone feels like you're genuinely trying to help them, they're much more likely to do business with you. It's always been the case. It's always been that. And think about a real estate agent. And in this example, you've got your real estate agent, and the real estate agent works with the buyer, and the buyer calls about a home they love. They see this posting online and they call about a home they love. But there are already multiple showings scheduled. So the agent itself has multiple showing schedules, which makes that the ad was working and the ad was doing its job. Instead of saying, I'm fully booked today, the agent says, I know this property has a lot of interest. There's a lot of people coming to see. There's likability. But I'm going to do everything I can to get you in for showing today so you don't miss that opportunity. Right away, the buyer is going to feel like the agent is advocating for them, not just processing some transaction. That effort, that kind of effort that you just heard, builds trust. Same thing in insurance. Imagine someone calls for a life and home insurance quote. Instead of saying, I'll send you some rates when I have time, the advisor is going to turn back, and hopefully the advisor will say, hey, I'll make this a priority today so you can compare your options and make the best decision for your family. Then name without feeling rushed. That simple shift, that simple shift tells me, and it tells the client, you're investing in helping them. I'm making this a priority today so that you can compare your options. I'm making this a priority. You're investing in helping them, not just making the sale. You want them to make the best decision for their family. You don't want to get them to be rushed. And this will people will like you, right? You're not just making a sale there. Then we come to the first P out of the two P's, and the second P is called perception. People don't want to feel pressured. People don't people or like they're being forced into a decision. They want to feel like they're in control. Instead of saying, hey, can we book a meeting to talk about our services? Try this. Do you have 5 to 10 minutes tomorrow around 3 p.m.? That way, if you ever decide to make a change down the road, you'll already know who we are, and you'll have us in your back pocket. This is kind of the subtle change in this scenario. But it shifts the dynamic. If you guys want to think about it that way, it's shifting the dynamic. So you're removing the pressure and you're giving that prospect the freedom to decide. And you're giving them that freedom to decide when or if they're ready to move forward. I hope that really makes sense to you. I'm going to give you another scenario. Um, you know, this is called the reducing pressure. Like you don't want to sign. I want your time. It kind of like, can we book a meeting to talk about our services? You're sounding like I want your time. I want to sell you something. You need to evaluate me right now. The buyer immediately thinks, I don't need another sales meeting. Try saying this instead. Do you have 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes tomorrow around 3 p.m.? And if there's whatever, it could be in any part of the country, so they're going to have their different time zones, right? So let's say, do you have 5 to 10 minutes? And this is you telling them that you want this at 3 p.m. Sometimes 2, 3 p.m., 1 to 3 is a good timing for sales. That way, if you ever decide to make change down the road, you already know who we are, and you'll have us in your back pocket. Again, the psychology is you're lower. You're kind of you're not immediately you're not there's no immediate buying decision in this one, right? So you're lowering that commitment. Um, you're trying to create future value, and there are better scenarios. For example, like in this IT, for example, like I have an IT services or cloud architecture, and you're looking at this approach saying, hey, can we meet? Can we schedule a meeting to discuss our cloud migration services, for example? You know, we're not migrating right now. How do you know? Right? You didn't get the discovery. You didn't find out whether or not there was any issues first about the business, right? You didn't have there was no business decision or any outcomes or risks or implications, right? So how would you know? So would you have 5 minutes, 15 minutes next week for a quick conversation? I'm not looking to change anything today. I'd simply like to understand your current environment so that if cloud modernization becomes a priority in the future, you already know who to call and we can bring some ideas to the table. See right there, you're selling future readiness. And I'm going to copy this for you. There's many approaches. There's many approaches to this. It's all up to you and how you want to apply your knowledge, and you don't want it to sound like a sales script, but you want it to sound conversational, normal. And the more experience you have, the more you're gonna sound, right? And you know would you have 15 minutes next week for a quick call conversation? You know the person's name already, so you're not going to really introduce your name and introduce yourself. You're not looking to change anything today. Give them that reason to understand, like, oh, this is just another sales call. I'd simply like to understand your current environment. So you're getting to the discovery stage, so that if cloud modernization or migration, right, for this service that you want to sell, um, becomes a priority in the future, right? So think about that, a priority in the future. You're not buying it now. You already know who to call, and we can bring some ideas from the discovery to the table. And sometimes you can finish up with an email, right? You're not really selling the migration. Again, you're selling future readiness. Think about it, right? I hope that really makes sense to you guys, because, you're not selling a migration, right? Or cloud modernization or a cybersecurity platform, right? Um, you want to become that advisor. Like I said before, you don't want to think like you're just another vendor wanting to sell me security tools. You're not, you're smarter than that, right? Think about it that way. And didn't like the English there, so we're gonna make that. You are not selling, you are selling. Okay. That was basically a, the proper way to talk about perception, right? And again, simple the better. Like, you don't have to memorize it. You can make this into a conversation. And the more experience and the more practice you get, the more you're going to understand, right? And the more you can kind of get your get into the discovery part and kind of get those questions done, right? Um, it's that subtle change, like I said. It shifts the dynamic here, right? So you're removing pressure. You want to remove pressure and give that prospect or client the freedom to decide when or if they're ready to move forward. Simple. Our third or second P, our third and last letter in the mnemonics for LPP and L2P. That word is positioning. Center this. You know, positioning is about helping prospects focus on the result rather than just the product. It's your position in that and how you're helping them focus on that result. So, you know, say for example, I'd like to train your sales team or real estate team to improve the way they're prospecting potential vendors, buyers, and prospects. This is where we could say, what would it mean for your business if your team, and again, this is, you want to train them, you want to get them, and this is if you're into the teaching stuff and you want to improve the prospecting of that team and kind of get more people to come along. You could say, hey, what would it mean for your business if your team doubled its sales and doubled in size over, let's say, 60 to 90 days, right? The product hasn't changed, right? First off, but the conversation has. You're no longer talking about training. It's the positioning, right? You're talking about growth, your position, revenue, your position, the future they want to create. You want to create value. You know, I the best conversations don't happen because someone memorized a script. These best conversations happen because the salesperson or the professional or the elite understands how people think and what motivates them to act. Whenever you're preparing for a meeting or executive meeting or client call, or remember the LPP framework. It may sound, again, it was a one that I decided to make, and I brought you along with me to kind of understand how that works because, you want to master these three principles, right? You want to master likability. You're building trust. You want to master perception. Think about this LPP because the LPP is what brings, you know, your LPP framework. People buy from people they like and trust, right? So it doesn't matter what you're selling. If someone feels like you're genuinely trying to help them, they're much more likely to do business with you. So as per that real estate agent, the buyer calls it a home they love. They're ready. Multiple showing scheduled. So instead of saying I'm fully booked today, you could say, hey, the agent could say, hey, I know this property has a lot of interest, but I'm going to do everything I can to get you in that showing for today so you don't miss out on that opportunity. Remember, the effort builds trust. The buyer feels like the agent is advocating for them, not just processing another transaction, right? And the same happens in insurance. Imagine someone calls for a home and life insurance. You want to send them the rates when they have time. I'll make this a priority today, right? You're creating comfort and confidence. Same principle applies when you're prospecting. People don't want to feel pressured like they're being forced into a decision, right? Um, you know, it's a small difference, but it changes how that conversation feels. And you're not really asking them to commit to buy anything. You're simply opening the door for this future relationship to have, right? Positioning matters just as much. Like I said, it creates value. You kind of you can sell the exact same product, but the way you frame it changes how people perceive its value, right? So, you're training the sales team to improve their prospecting. What would it mean for the business if it doubled, like I said, and doubled in size and doubled in sales in the next 60 to 90 days? People aren't buying training, they're buying growth, they're buying better results and a bigger future for their business. You have to think of it that way. Um, it's very, very important. So, the LPP framework, and I'm reaching to my end here. The LPP framework is just a reminder that, sales is about people before it's products. I've always said that. And, the likability comes from people, right? People like you, right? They like you. It's a reminder. And if they like you, you're building trust. And when prospects like you, they become more open to listen. When they feel they're in control, they become more comfortable making the decisions, right? And when you position your solutions, any solution, right, around that outcome that they want instead of just features you're offering, again, they become to see that value for themselves. Whether you're selling real estate, whether you're selling insurance, financial services, you're selling a product, remember, these three principles will always remain the same, right? You're building trust, you earn trust. You create comfort and confidence, you reduce resistance. You want to create value, you create desire, right? Remember something. Ask yourself this, even before every conversation. Like, have I built trust? Have I given this the prospect control? And have I positioned the outcome instead of the product? If you answered yes, and I'm going to write this down for you because I think this here is important, right? And have I built trust? Have I given the prospect control? And have I positioned the outcome instead of the product, right? Product or products, right? If you've answered yes, you're no longer just making a sales pitch. You're having this conversation that's meaningful, and that helps people. And that helps people make confident decisions. That's what separates any average salesperson from a professional or an exceptional one. And that's the foundation of every lasting client relationship. I'll see you guys in the next one.